A very warm welcome to everyone, everyone who is joining us in person and also everyone joining online. This afternoon we have with us one, I think, of the best and best known Irish directors of his generation, Conor Hanratty, in conversation with Edith Hall. We are very honored to have Conor with us. He is, I think, very widely known for his work on Shakespeare, but we have him this afternoon for the work that he has done on the Greeks, perhaps less well known, but equally important. And we are very grateful to Edith for organizing and facilitating this event. I look forward to your discussion. Over to you, Edith.
Thank you so much, Pantelis. It's wonderful to be here, as ever. Lovely to be back. I've known Conor for a very long time, as we become apparent, but the immediate reason why I was so excited and said to my colleagues at the archives that we really need to have Conor now is that on St. Patrick's Day 2024 I got on a Ryanair, and everybody else on the Ryanair from Stansted was either dressed as a leprechaun or in Irish rugby kit because there was a big international. I, however, was going to the Abbey Theatre. Much more important. And it was just joyous. I wasn't giving a lecture, I had to do no work whatsoever. I love this. And Marina Carr's new play, Ordering or Sorrow, was on in the afternoon, which is the ghosts of Agamemnon meet Beckett, basically. And in the evening, I saw the oldest play in the world, done in one of the oldest languages in the world, was the Persians and we suppose Conor had been talking about doing it in Irish forever. I have to admit I had my doubts it would ever happen.
We all did.
And when the ghost of Dareios came out on the stage, it was like being at the birth of theatre. It was like it was just like we are at the very birth of theatrical communication. But the highlight for me, the one I cannot get out of my head, apart from that, was Xerxes. So would you like to tell us a little bit about your decision on Xerxes and then play us a bit?
Well, I was taught by some very fine people who all seem to be in the room today, which is really lovely. But the big soundbite about Xerxes is that he's the only, now correct me please, he's the only character in all of Greek tragedy that exists that we know is completely sung through.
That is true.
We're off the hook. And in the Irish sort of traditional performing arts, we have a style of singing which is called sean-nós, which means the old style. But it's a very melismatic, unaccompanied storytelling style. And I thought, well, if he has to sing all the way through, we should try and do something that means something to us, that will vibrate with us as an Irish audience, but is also communicable and something that you want to listen to, because if someone just comes in and intones everything, it's probably going to sound like mass, which we're not as interested in anymore. But trying to find in the month of March, when every single traditional Irish music performer is very busy because of St. Patrick's Day, it's very difficult. And the person that I wanted to get is a glorious singer called Leonard, who is in the Gloaming, the traditional group, if you've ever heard of them. And his agent, Irla, said, yes, I'd love to do it. I'd be honoured. And we had worked on a podcast version of this in advance. And he said, yes, no problem. And then his agent said, I can get you 10 times what you'll earn for the entire run of the show if I send you to Tokyo for one night in March. So he was no longer available. So national manhunt ensued, and we found this glorious young fella from Donegal, who is a sean-nós singer. He's doing a PhD at Queen's University in Belfast on folklore, and what he likes to do is go to archives and harvest material and old songs, like Tamagotchis almost, so that they won't be forgotten. He wants to keep music alive.
He's actually from the Gael Much, isn't he?
He's from the Gael.
It's his first language.
In Donegal. Yeah. And he has, it's not, you can't say it's a pretty voice, but when he sings, it's just, it's really quite breathtaking. And we'd all be sitting in rehearsal, and every time he'd come in and volunteer something, he'd just sing it, and we'd be like, perfect, yeah, no problem. So trying to sculpt that into something then, and of course, we gave him the translated version of Aeschylus, so everything that he sang is correct to the play. And then we kind of chopped at it here and there to make it into a viable piece of song material. And we ended the show with him singing the lament in a completely Irish way.
I think it would be really good. I think the best way in order to get people into the vibe of this whole production would be to hear a bit of that audio first.
I will preface this. This is the composer Mel Mercier, who did the Fiona Shaw Medea.
Yes.
Since another landmark from my country. Mel created this piece of music for the radio. We were on there's a flagship RT radio arts program. We didn't have anything ready from rehearsal to perform in studio because, of course, they wanted to talk to us 3 weeks early. But so Mel put this together with Nisha, the sean-nós singer. So you'll hear his voice singing. There's a little more drumming in this than wound up being at the end of the show, but it will give you a sense of all the things we were trying to knit together.
That silence at the end of this play, there was perhaps actually a minute's silence at the end of this performance, the production, and that before the applause. And I always think that the length of time before people actually start applauding is really, really interesting. Not so much with comedy, maybe, but with tragedy. That we didn't actually want to break it. It was quite remarkable. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do a bit of biographical digging about why a nice young lad like you ended up involved in deepest, darkest Aeschylean waters. And then we'll start to unpick your actual directorial decisions about that a bit later. So take us right back to the beginning. Are you from a theatre family?
Absolutely not a bit of it. I was the first show I ever saw was Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat when I was about 6, 7, and I saw it on stage and I went, I'll have a bit of that. Whatever's going on there, I want to go to that party. So,
Where was that?
oh, some school hall in the middle of Dublin.
Oh right, it was a school
It was
production.
young people, yeah.
So are you a Dubliner?
I'm very much so, yes.
You,
Still wearing the Dublin colours even today.
and I met your lovely dad. So,
Yeah.
so what sort of family was it?
2 teachers. My dad is a science teacher. My mum taught French and English and history. So the arts and the humanities versus the sciences. And I'm the weird centre of that Venn diagram there.
And did you start with acting?
I did. I went to the drama teacher who had put on that Joseph was the drama teacher, and I went to her classes. And for years I thought I was going to be an actor. And I have not acted in 20 years since a certain production of The Trojan Women at Royal Holloway in 2004, where I gave my Hecuba and I can do no more.
Gosh, I wish I'd seen that.
Oh, you're fine. I got distinction for the project, but I don't know. I didn't get any job offers afterward.
Perhaps Professor Wiles could give an eyewitness account of that
Still
later.
too soon, I think.
So were you involved in dramatics as a teen then?
Yeah, I was in the school play. I went to the school I went to in Dublin because they put on plays. And then I wanted to do it in university. I do have to tell the story of the video.
Please do.
My mother was a very good teacher, and she'd often record things off the telly for us, you know, that she thought for me and for my brother that we should watch. And there was a BBC, it was Open University, BBC, documentary about Greek tragedy starring
Oh,
and Professor Chapman. And they used clips from a production of this Japanese dude who did a version of Medea. And I thought, again, I was brought to it, I thought, and I said, whatever that is, that's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And so I studied Greek in secondary school, and I wanted to do drama and Greek as my undergraduate, but they wouldn't let me. So I did drama and Latin, just to have the Latin to fall back on.
and was that in Dublin?
I went to Trinity and they let me in to do that. And
Did Latin with drama and Latin, okay.
just in case I was going to become a priest, I suppose. But that has not happened. It's a brilliant joke I could make. Rather than being attracted to the monastery, I was more drawn to the abbey.
Very good.
That's right from somebody else, but it applies. And so then 2 things happened in the summer of 2002. I was sent by Steve Wilmer in Dublin to Epidaurus to a summer programme all about performances of ancient Greek and mostly Greek drama. And I met a fabulous lady called Amanda Wrigley who told me about this mythical place in Oxford where they have all sorts of videos and archival materials. And we're still here today. And I also saw a sign on the wall when I was handing in my final piece of paperwork. So look out for bulletin boards. It didn't exist anymore, but this is still when there was paper on a wall with an announcement of if you'd like to go and study in Japan, the applications are open for a scholarship to go to Tokyo or to wherever you want in Japan. And it had been there obviously for months, and the application was due 5-6 days hence. So I lifted the bulletin, but nobody else clearly wanted it.
And this was with Ninagawa?
Well, this was just from the Japanese government.
And
They have a scholarship program. So within a week, I managed to cobble something together, and somebody from a university in Tokyo said that if I could get the scholarship, they'd let me come and work there. And so I applied, and I got the medical that you had to take to be allowed to apply. I had a little email saying something, and I applied. I think most people go for this scholarship for, you know, real jobs, like history or international relations, things like that. So the cultural attaches in Dublin saw me applying and said, "This is director, I think he's amazing. I don't know anything about him, but I want to go there." And they said, "Okay." I've got to go to Japan. In the meantime, I went to Royal Holloway and did a master's in Greek theatre performance, where I wrote I hope a pretty good thesis on a production by this Ninagawa.
So this was before you went to
before I
Japan?
went.
So which production did you do of his?
Oedipus.
You did the Oedipus.
Yes. And then the summer of 2004, after my Hecuba, in Athens, in the Herodoticus Theatre, they brought the Oedipus for the Olympics.
Right.
So I got to see it live, and it's marvelous. And then I name dropped Oliver Taplin while I was in Tokyo. I got a meeting with Ninagawa's English producer, and it turns out in Japan it's all about who you get introduced by. So at her level, she took me for what she said would be a coffee in the bar of a Tokyo hotel. It was not coffee. And by about 11 o'clock at night, she was telling me all sorts of stories, and she kept saying, "No, you can't put this in the book." They're not in the book. But then she, completely unfazed, she said, if you're here by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning with a letter in Japanese, I'll present it to darling Nina. And
Darling Nina, okay.
Big Nina usually, but it was darling. Everybody was darling a lot. And so I went home, not especially sober. It was her fault. And I got something written, and I had made some friends in Tokyo by this point. And so somebody translated it very generously, and I wrote it. I got back to the Tokyo Metropolitan Hotel, and I gave it to her. And a week later, I started in rehearsal with actual Ninagawa.
So you do have to tell us something about what's that. I mean, can't speak for everybody else, but my full knowledge of I've seen some of his Shakespeare's, a bit of Shakespeare and the Oedipus. So what is his rehearsal directorial style? What is it like?
It was like a feudal court. He had his desk at the center, and then each of his assistants had a desk a little bit behind. And then there was a row wall behind, and the designers each had their own desk. And it was like, also as a fledgling director, I was sitting there spoiled, going, "Oh God, I can't wait till I have this." I will never have any of that. The company would come in at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they do physical exercises, nothing like Suzuki or anything like that, but like they would just get themselves ready, and they'd be warmed up, and they'd rehearse little bits of things. He would arrive in at noon, and you'd know he was there because the room went silent, and he shuffled in, and then they would work. He had a reputation for being an absolute demon. In the 70s, allegedly, he threw chairs and ashtrays at people. Probably true.
You would credit it.
He was not like that anymore.
But was he little and old?
Was he what?
Was he too fragile to throw an ashtray in?
Oh, no. He was kind of self-confident enough to be like, everybody's going to be ready. The only reason I ever saw him lose his temper was if people were insufficiently prepared.
Right.
If you knew your stuff and you worked hard, he was a pussycat. And it was a really lovely room, and they worked incredibly hard.
So what were the plays that you and were you allowed to join in?
Yeah, I sat and watched.
Okay. So
I had a table like over there. They gave me a table.
What plays did you participate in, and what did you learn? 2 questions.
There was a crazy. It was the year that I was there was his 40th year. It was his 20th year of running one theatre, his 30th with another. It was lots of anniversaries, all in 2005. He did a play that was a mad 1970s thing that took all of the plays of Shakespeare and turned them into one 4-hour play. All of the plots woven in it, and it was all set in sort of a particular year in Japanese history. That I have no idea what that play is about still, because I couldn't really get an English language version. Then there was his Orestes, which was very interesting. His Titus Andronicus that came to the Royal Shakespeare Company for one of their anniversaries, and a play by Hideki Noda, and one other that I've forgotten. And Tango at the End of Winter, which he redid at the end of that year, which was really, really special.
And what did you learn?
I learned that Japanese people have a lot more money in the theatre when it's commercially subsidized, as his was, and that I would have to be humble for a long time before I will have a room like that. But the attention to detail didn't change, regardless of this vast quantity of resources he had, and he kept at it until he felt it was right. And that's. Sometimes you can feel a little sheepish. I can feel a little sheepish, and like at the end of the day, it's like, "Oh, we just have to go home, it'll be fine." No, do it one more time, and then it might be better. But that sort of rigor and discipline was really a good thing to learn.
But I mean, aesthetically, is there anything that you could say in the Persians was something you learned from?
Yeah, I mean, the big philosophical thing, I suppose, is that he took all of these European, occasionally American texts, and he would filter them through a lens of the local. Or the vast quantities of Japanese culture that he could use as something to refract it or to make it accessible to an audience. And he always sort of talked about being a bridge between cultures. And certainly it took a long time to figure out what might work in my context, because I'm not trying to put on something that's Japanese, but at the same time, there is a huge Irish cultural tradition that is very rich and would be very interesting to work with. And that's certainly where the Persians came.
Right.
Absolutely.
I think they call it glocal now, don't they? Local theatre, exactly. So, did Xerxes come west? I'd missed entirely that.
There's a DVD of it.
Is there?
You might have it upstairs. If
What
not,
did he
you might know somebody who has it.
What did he do with the Orestes?
Not a huge amount.
Oh.
His favourite movie star, Fujiwara Tatsuya, who you might know his face from, he's in Death Note, if that means anyone. Yeah, thank you. He's the star of that, and he had seen other Greek tragedies. He's seen them a day. He'd seen the Oedipus and said, "I want to be in a Greek tragedy, please." So they picked a Greek tragedy about a hot-headed young man.
Disaffected young man, right?
So, it did have an amazing female chorus, and they were very funny. And he made it work, because that chorus is always getting in trouble for making too much noise, waking Orestes up. And he put like ankle bells on all of them, so they make more noise, and they all have those bells as well. And it rained on stage. Obviously,
It rained.
it rained. Yeah, a lot.
Because I could actually, what I know of Japanese culture is mainly because one of my children has studied Japanese at university, I've been there, but actually disaffected young gang of people should have a real Japanese residence.
I think they were more interested in making it look like Yuri Grotowski's, what was the Prince?
Right.
And they were, he looked like that. He was wearing the same kind of costume.
But this wasn't his best production.
No, it wasn't the kind of intercultural success that say the Medea, that they plus ultra.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you spent 2 years there.
Mm-hmm.
And then did you go back to Ireland? Is that when you went to California?
I went back to Ireland for a year because I got onto a programme for young directors in Dublin, and I had a terrific time, and I realised that I do absolutely nothing. And I did a production of Caligula, and then Ninagawa did a production of Caligula. He had a lot more money, mine was better.
Sorry, who's Caligula?
Camus.
Right.
Yeah. And then thanks again to, I keep pointing at Oliver, but thanks to the programme in Epidurus, I heard about this nice, interesting MFA programme in directing in UCLA. And I applied to that, and they let me in. So I went and I made all of my mistakes 8 time zones away in the other direction. And I really just put through my paces on that. It was a brilliant programme. It was incredibly difficult.
What?
Well, I thought I knew things. You can go into a room and I did not. And I had some shotgun failures there. I really was very excited to do Much Ado About Nothing. It is a beautiful play. It is a play about people in their 30s, and I did it with a bunch of 20-year-old actors, and that was never going to work. And that was hard. But you learn and you keep going.
At what point did you start realising that your heart lay often or a lot with opera?
That happened in California. A professor from the opera department in a sort of collegial spirit came to an event in the theatre department, and he said, "Come play with us. You might like us." And there was a student the year ahead of me who only wanted to do opera, and he had engineered a bunch of opportunities for himself, and then very kindly graduated and left them all open. So I got to profit a little bit. But yeah, I was 27, and I realised that there's a place where choruses like you have in Greek tragedy and poetry like you have in Shakespeare, and that wonderful music that you'd be pretty fond of, are all in the one job. So,
What was there? Did Peter Sellers have an impact on you at that time?
I took his class for 2 years, and he's not really interested in training anybody to be anything other than a good person, which sounds really trite. I don't mean it that way.
He's actually said, "I'm way more interested in politics than I'm in theatre."
Yeah.
He's actually said
And
that.
like he teaches in the Department of World Arts and Cultures. Like he's no connection to the theatre department
Right.
or the opera department. He's in his own realm. And we just sat and were people, and we talked about the world, and we talked about politics a lot. And
Did you see any of his classical productions?
no.
No. This was way later than the Ajax and the Persians.
Yeah, they had all happened in the past. I mean, he talked about them, and we would discuss, and he'd hear that I brought him to Epidurus.
Did you?
Just to come and visit, and he gave a keynote, but he had never been to Greece in his life.
Really?
Yeah. So we had this beautiful day. We went to Mycenae first. And as we were walking in, some tourist in front of us had tripped, so there was blood all over the lid. And he was very excited about this. And then as we were walking away from Mycenae, it started to rain, which does not happen often in July in Greece.
No.
And he started quoting, you know, the quality of mercy is not strained, it droppeth like the gentle rain from heaven. And he was off. He had a terrific time. And then so it rained all the way from there across to Epidaurus. And so all of the little gullies and bits and sluices of things were all full of water. It was trickling. All of the pine trees were wet and delicate, and he just felt like he had been welcomed home.
And do you feel? I mean, I certainly felt in your Persians there were things that reminded me, especially the rather ritual and ceremonial gesturing. Did you feel you have absorbed some of his?
Some of him, I have to say, if I have a
Has he been an inspiration or not?
He's in my head, but more trying to like do something that rattles people.
Right.
That sort of stuff that you're responding to, I think I owe a little bit more to. There's a Greek director, Terzopoulos,
Okay.
who I am a very big fan of. And I the first time I went to Epidaurus, I saw his back eye, and I've never really been frightened by a play before, but that was scary. It was in German. And it just had this extraordinary chorus of people who never stopped kind of, I wouldn't even say moving, it's like they were throbbing and they all breathed the same. And apparently, if you've seen one Terzopoulos, you've kind of seen them all. But it's a really good thing to have seen. And
did you see his Oresteia this
I
time?
did. I went and made a little.
What did you think of that?
I loved it. I hated the last 3 minutes.
Yeah, so did I.
Hated it.
Yeah.
But until then, I was hook, line, and sinker. At the very, very end, he tried to make a sort of trite comment about contemporary politics, and he played a bunch of news reports, and he turned the whole stage red, and it was not, we were so just ready to do whatever he said, and then I thought, yeah, I didn't love the ending, but the rest of it, like, I mean, I've never seen a chorus quite as startlingly precise as they were.
That's a movement.
And just that sort of architecture and geometry and playing with arrangements of things, and then there's a sort of a violence to like extreme choreography, of course. And that certainly is the thing that I've really enjoyed seeing in his work. Mine is a little softer, because I think Irish is a little softer. But definitely there's arrangements there, like there's very, very strong diagonals in the production.
So you've done a lot of operas, more opera than stage plays.
I think it's nearly 50-50.
Is it?
I'm getting away with doing both, but
Well,
people
what
do
do
tend to
you
get
make-
pigeonholed, so.
What historically have you been sort of most proud of? What which of your productions? No, I know. And one minute we're getting on to it, but we just want a bit more of an interim between like 2010 and 2024.
I founded a company in Dublin, and since I found it after I came home to Dublin, I of course called it Ulysses. And with Tom, my co-artistic director, we've made a lot of pieces that kind of respond to different parts of the city. So if you go to Dublin now, there's a new museum called Epic, which is all about Ireland's history of emigration, because we've got a lot of places. And that building was almost derelict, and we did an IKEA-inspired opera in there that was a big hit in the Fringe Festival, and all of a sudden everybody wanted to put pieces in there. And I'm delighted that, you know, it has reanimated that end of the docks. And as soon as that was over, then Tom had nearly put us all in early care, and we were sitting just having a coffee about a week afterwards and said, so what are we going to do next? And he looked across the River Liffey. There's a massive Calatrava bridge that is fairly new. It arrived just at the end of 2008, 2009, when there was no money left in Dublin. Everything had gone wrong. So nobody paid any attention to how many million euro were spent on this bridge. That does work, but it's a beautiful bridge, but it looks like a harp. And he went, I think we're going to turn that into a musical instrument. So Tom, he's a proper genius. He harvested all of the frequencies of all the strings of this harp scientifically, and then he translated that into humanly audible sound and turned that into a chord and wrote a whole opera cantata for the bridge. And now the bridge is lit up for Christmas every year because of us. So,
Gosh,
pretty proud of that. I like that Dublin looks a little bit prettier thanks to some things that we did.
reminds me of Hermes and the Humber Bridge and Tony Harrison's Prometheus. The kids are a bridge. So let's talk about the Persians.
Sure.
Can you take us through some of your amazing photographs?
Yes, of course.
Give us a little presentation before we talk about it and take questions.
I have like 100 photographs. So can we just get it to sort of auto play? And if you could go in that. This now, I did do one slide, maybe two. But the reason I wanted to do this play of all plays is because in the Irish poetic tradition, there's like two major things that we have, which is the Aisling, which is a dream or a vision poem, very, very much while the English were in control of Ireland, the Irish language was a site of a lot of rebellion and a lot of kind of national identity before we were nationally identified, shall I say. So the Aisling poem, it would appear to a young man, and it would be a female figure sort of trying to inspire a young man to rise up and fight for the country. And then the other major thing is that we have our own tradition of laments, which would be a quina. Don't ever, if you ever see Irish words written down, we have no respect for what vowels should be. So if you've ever met anybody called Aisling or Breed or Sinead or Niamh, you know this, but certainly you'd never know that it's pronounced quina. But these are exclusively, or almost exclusively, performed by women. So then happening upon a Greek tragedy that has a dream that appears to a woman about a young man and a lament performed by a young man instead of a woman is an automatic gender, call it a gender fuck, anyway, I know it's not very fancy, but that's what it is.
Inversion.
Thank you, yes. The artist didn't use that language, I'm very sorry. So that's the first half, and if I can have the next one. The other two traditions that I wanted to play with when I happened upon thinking that Persians could work. The sean-nós, you'd never get that pronunciation, is a traditional form of an Irish storyteller. If you've ever been to a pub in Ireland and some old man has told you some story, probably about a leprechaun or some such. The sean-nós is the tradition of the sort of senior statesman within a community. We're very good at telling stories and we love it. And especially to US American tourists, they will buy it. And we love it, we'll sell it. And that sort of tied in then to how we were going to approach this gigantic messenger speech.
Right.
And then sean-nós, I mentioned already, is this unaccompanied form, unusually long melodramatic phrases, certainly. And I love this quote here. No aspect of Irish music can be fully understood without a deep appreciation of sean-nós singing. It is the key which opens every lock.
Wow.
Which is a pretty great quote.
Yeah.
So that were the kind of the four poles around which we pitched this tent. I had always wanted to do something that responded to our language. The Irish sounds so radically different to English. A lot of people don't ever think that we have our own language. And we all learn it in school, and the vast majority of us hate it because we learn it in such a way as to be examined rather than learning it as a language which is a means of communication, of falling in love, of saying poems, of singing songs. That's when it gets interesting. But we don't do that stuff because in a state examination you can't do much more than write a letter or discuss that, you know,
Your hobbies.
or where I went on my holidays.
So can we take us into the visual world a bit?
Sure.
Because there was a tiny Game of Thrones about it.
Yes, should we turn the lights off? Yeah, it might be back in.
It was extraordinary visually to me. It was otherworldly, but also archaic, and it was kind of Bronze Age.
Yeah, we very much, we did not want to do a production that looked like it was set in Persia.
You need to move up.
Oh, God, get out of the way.
No, it did not look like
Just because,
Achaemenid architecture.
and Edward Said would crucify us. Like we're not trying to be Oriental. We're not trying to be anything other than what we are. Happily, Game of Thrones is all made in Ireland, so we kind of feel like we own that. But as a visual index, if nothing else, there's a little bit of armor, a little bit of leather work, and I think we did have one costume that might have come from the studio that made them. So, but Joan O'Cleary, who was the costume designer, did a gorgeous thing of sort of making all these robes for, these are all my Persians here. They all look like they were part of the same community, but every one of those dresses is completely different. Just because they would fit the bodies of the people who were wearing them. We began the piece with a list of names just because there weren't enough in the piece already. And these valiant actors learned off. Well, we made a list of every single person who's named in the show in order. Artembanes, Artafrenes, Megalatis, Astaspis. We learned it as a kind of a chant, and then slowed it down. And one by one, they came in at the beginning, and each had a candle to make it a sort of an everyday thing that they have been doing this since their men went off to war. And then today will be different because news actually arrives. Eventually there will be a wider shot and you'll get a sense of what the stage looks like. This is them coming in at the beginning. Deirdre here, I have known since I was a child. Her dad was my primary school headmaster, and she has gorgeous Irish, but she hadn't used it for 30 years and almost refused to do the show, but I bullied her into it. And she was magnificent. She was. I'm very proud that she's now in Oxford. This will be Dareios a little bit later. So you can keep going a little bit because it's the whole show. There, yeah, we got a bit. That's a bit of a sense of the whole thing. As you can see, there's a good diagonal there. We made it quite a ritual piece just because I wanted to have a whole load of candles on the stage for reasons that will come later. It's a very community thing. I did cast a bunch of women because why wouldn't I? It's 2024 and these are glorious. This is Breed actually. If you've seen the Banshees of Inisherin, she's the postmistress who keeps opening the letters. And if Kelly Condon was a braver woman, she could have nominated herself for Best Actress, and Breed would have been nominated for Best Supporting Actress. And it's the sort of lady high priest of Persia doing her thing over the candles and summoning the dead nearly. Well, that's later. So you can see it gets quite symmetrical as they're moving around, and we split things up in terms of these are the mourning women with all the empty beds in Persia, like a flock of bees. They've gone away. Here's the Queen. This is Katrina. She's as close to a muse as I have. I think it's a bit fake to be saying I have a muse, but Katrina and I have worked together a lot. She played Maria Callas for me last year. I did masterclass the play about the diva for her centenary, and not content with being a diva, she became an empress. So this kind of collar we built as a sort of an homage as much to ancient Egypt. This is as close to looking at like a Kemenite clothing as we got, but it's not really. But she does have a black one because she changes her costume in the show. And this is the dress rehearsal, so I hadn't been steamed and I'm mortified. But she's very special. You get a sense that they're all kind of put together at this point. I love this because my set designer and my lighting designer had a chat to try and make it look like a vase painting because we have his black figure against the red background, just as he came into the space. This is the extraordinary Timmy, who this guy did one audition for me, and he was in a car somewhere on Zoom, and I said, I think we can get him in and give him a real audition. So he came into the room, he had learned the whole thing, and he performed it. And again, I can't stress enough, learning this in Irish to present it was an extraordinary feat. And he had the parts. And he grew out his beard to look again a little bit Persian. But he does look like he's been through a war.
The messenger speech was extraordinary. I thought this is going to be a slog. A slog with such a minimalist set, and quite a stylized type, type of acting. And it's so long. And in fact, he took us with him quite incredibly, I thought. But what you said at the beginning about the tradition of the storytelling, exactly. Old guy in the pub.
It was the only way we could go about it, because to listen to that much Irish and that much woe and that many names.
He had huge alterations in volume, didn't he? And pitch.
I mean,
so some very quiet bits, which really drew
and he really, and the second half of his journey home is so bleak that we pulled it right back, and it just got sadder and sadder every time. So he just sat and then told the end of it and couldn't move anymore. I haven't seen these photographs in months and months. What we did as well, we took one of the choral odes and just gave it to Breed, who is a beautiful Irish speaker. And what we wanted to try and do is this is the one that's all about the parents in Asia and the hunger that's coming. And we in Ireland, if we know anything, we know hunger. So we made it slightly vibrate a little bit with the famine with the west of Ireland. Breed in particular is from the west. So if she talks about an empty house, everybody in the audience will see an empty stone cottage in Connemara. And yeah. So we have our ritual. This is the least Irish part of it. We just made up a thing and they all had little vials for each of the different liquids that they're going to offer, and each of the ladies of the chorus had a part. And it got a bit scary, but hopefully not too hammer horror.
I thought the ghost raising was beautifully done.
So she stayed on it. She participated in the ritual, but she didn't speak. But she sort of stage manages it. And this is my Carlos Coon homage here. Particularly this.
You might have to explain what Carlos Coon
Carlos Coon is a Greek theatre
What
director.
did he do for the chorus with his Persians in the 60s?
Well, he actually made it look like they'd all stepped out of a relief sculpture. But he was very interested in tapping into Greek folk traditions. So he's more famous for comedy, but his Persians, I think, were one of his biggest successes because it felt Greek and very traditional. This is the stunt now. I had all these candles because I wanted Dareios to appear from the smoke. So
Well, there is smoke mentioned in the text.
well, that's where it came from.
All right.
But so we had them all blow out the candles and change the lights. So as the smoke rose from these extinguished candles, our eye travelled up, and there he was.
But he didn't come up head first.
Well,
Feet first. You know, the Greek says weirdly that his feet come first.
he did step in. It was as much as I could offer. The architecture available in the smaller space of the Peacock Theatre was such that we could only do so much. But he does have yellow slippers.
He does.
And we played a lot with whether he was able to touch anything anymore. And then we just thought if he's coming back, he's coming back. So there was a little moment of touch with Pantelis, and he also, there was a gully of water across the front of the stage, and he washed his hands in that,
That's right.
and then watched his empire kind of fade away. There it is there. And again, worrying about what the upstart sun has been getting up to. And again, he did very little moving, but it felt.
Was the tree a little homage to Handel?
Yes.
But in Handel's Xerxes, there's this very famous aria.
Ombra mai fu.
Oh yes, cut my tree. I wondered
He
that.
sings a love song to a tree, and
Yeah.
that's Xerxes singing it. So he came home, and the first thing he does is he just touches a leaf of the tree.
Yeah.
And 2 opera maidens got that.
Amazing.
You're up to 3 now. Thank you very much. So, and again, this, for all of the ladies of the course, they start off quite buttoned up, and they're sashes that are tired, that they had something to rip open and tear. And then it became a much longer, sort of more bereft look.
Is there robe tearing in traditional Irish keening?
Kind
Do
of,
they
but-
tear their hair or their robes?
Yes, but we don't know. I mean, the tradition of hiring mourners to go to a funeral is very real,
Yeah,
but there's a gap in time,
right.
and nobody really knows anymore what it should be. Towards the end, we have the one thing that we do know physically that I have put into it, but it would have felt very fake if we'd tried to do like a version of what we think people have told us they remember of what it was like at a funeral.
Sure.
There isn't enough of a direct link that I felt would be worth it. So I mean, they opened and they took off their tops and they lamented severely, but it wasn't trying to ape a tradition that we don't know. And here's Xerxes now in his rags and his bare feet.
Looks a bit like Russell Crowe.
A bit. This is Nietzsche, whose voice you heard. The voice is astonishing, but he is not an actor. He'd never been in a play before. So directing wise, of course, I made him stand still and I gave him a staff to lean on, and he did nothing.
And said, do not move.
But he didn't need to. Because there's so
I
much
know, I said
character.
just before this, I said, it was great. What I really admired about Xerxes was how still he was. And he just said, that's called directing.
What his contribution was enormous and really, really moving, but that's where his gifts lie. So, for the end here, you can just see what they're doing. There's a very physical aspect to kind of communal mourning, especially in the traditional communities in Ireland, that they kind of hold on to each other and they almost row physically through their grief. So my choreographer, Owen, who is also from Connemara, developed this with them so that they joined hands for a moment and they all rowed together.
So, see that she says that row with your arms, doesn't she? So you're reading the text and seeing
And then adapting.
things that are actually totally fit with our Irish tradition.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for showing that. That gives you a very good visual account, but still photos never quite get it. Those look a bit static. And actually it wasn't
But
static. The chorus was constantly moving, but there weren't young these women.
I guarantee, I had to insist that nobody in the show could be under 40.
No, but this was, I think this choice of the female chorus is crucial. I thought you actually improved Aeschylus here. I actually think this was better than a chorus of older men.
Mhm.
It gave it, because there were so many of the odes construct a figure of Mother Asia, who's mourning and lamenting, and because of gender stereotypes that still afflict us today, a weeping woman is a more dignified figure, more easily than a weeping and lamenting and very mobile man. And it gave it a sort of sonorous dignitas somehow. So how did that choice come about? Was it just there weren't enough Irish-speaking men around?
I could have filled the chorus with male performers who had enough Irish, but with all these women on the list who are the very finest, I mean, the producers in the Abbey were raging at me. The Abbey have a system. Once you've been in the door, you have like the first rate for your first job there, and the more often you perform in the Abbey, the more. These are all very experienced ladies, so they all came in at the top rate, and I was supposed to save them some money with this. I did not. But I'm sorry, if you get these kind of people on your list, regardless of their gender, I'm more interested. I was telling Edith beforehand, every show I've ever done where I could get away with it, I've given roles to female performers because it's more interesting. And these in particular were very interesting, and for all the reasons, it just felt like it was a richer offering.
They're also just incredibly beautiful. They've all got extraordinary
The one that
Irish bone structure.
I cast for voice more than anything.
I know, but they look stunning too.
Conveniently,
They and quite similar.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know whether it was that the makeup or just that they all got great.
Maybe I had a type.
It reminded me of Herodotus saying how good looking the Greeks found the Persians very uniform and good looking. And the guys he's talking about, but they kind of. Okay, and Hippocrates has water faces. He says Greeks all look different. The Asiatics are all uniformly big and beautiful, and they seem big and beautiful. So seriously, it was very striking.
Very happy.
So you want women in there because it's a political act? What women in there?
Well, I've never seen a play where I thought there's too many women, and certainly Greek tragedy and Shakespeare do not have enough roles for women. And
have you cast women in Shakespeare then?
yes.
What examples?
I knew you'd ask me that. I did Oswald the Lenzo a few years ago, and LeFew and all the figures of authority were women, except for the king, who was a nuisance of a man. And I'm currently working, don't tell anyone, it stays with us, turn off the internet. I'm currently working on chopping up all of the Henry VI and Richard III plays to make Shakespeare's play Queen Margaret.
Queen Margaret?
And
where are you going to do that?
We'll see. We might start a bidding war. I have to write the script first to see if there is proof of concept that it'll work. But again, she's the largest female role that Shakespeare ever wrote across all of those plays put together. And I would much rather look at a play about her than yet another interminable trilogy of Henrys.
And perhaps in the questions, which in 5 minutes I'll throw this open to questions, but could you just talk a bit about the text, because you landed very lucky with your translator.
Well,
actually.
there was really only one.
You took my incredibly privy Alison Phillips translation.
You're to be helpful with detailed notes.
Okay, but
be used in performance.
But it's quite faithful. I tried to do all the metaphors. I tried to be true to the syntax and the metaphor, but you really struck lucky with your Irish poet.
Well, I mean, she was the only option. Sorry,
Nuala,
it's a new play by a woman. Nuala Ní Dhomhnaill is one of our finest poets. She works predominantly through Irish. She herself has the most extraordinary life. She grew up in Kerry in another Gaeltacht community there. She moved to England to get away from a wild mother about whom she's written astonishingly good poems. And then she married a Turkish geologist or geographer. And so she learned Greek just because one does, but she speaks Dutch from having lived there. She's obviously bilingual English and Irish, and speaks Turkish, Turkey having been Persia. And I wrote to her kind of on spec, thinking that this would be a glorious person to get to do a new she's a very fine, accomplished poet. She doesn't need lunatic theatre directors writing and saying, hello, would you like a job? But what I didn't know was that I wrote to her about a week and a half after her husband died. So she wrote back and she said, I will do it, and I will do it in his memory. So she did. And this was in 2014 or so. So it took 10 years. But then again, pitching, hello, let's put on a Greek tragedy in Irish.
It
took some time.
sounded poetic. I mean, I don't have a word of Irish, but did she deliberately? It wasn't rhyming, we don't,
No.
but it was. It had got a pulse.
It had, exactly, and I had said to her that I mean, Oliver can speak much more eloquently than I can about, say, Seamus Heaney's versions of Greek tragedy and the way that he would draw on. There's a very famous lament, and Seamus, he's my friend, used the same meter that's in Queen Arthur in his version of Antigone.
Yes.
I had said to Nuala that there's have been successes in that kind of thing, but what I'm more interested in is it language that moves and has direction and rhythm that way. So that's what she did. It's very beautiful. The native speakers in the company were constantly moved by it and talking about it.
Right.
What a pleasure and a privilege it was to be able to speak it aloud. So that it always felt like it had heft and it had muscle. But it wasn't trying to be in rhyme or in anapests or anything like that.
No, I have to say it's a unique experience. I mean, obviously I've seen many plays in languages I don't speak, including languages I don't speak at all, with surtitles. It was very odd. I didn't realise it was my translation. We were trying to remember what it was, but there was just one adjective. And I thought, God, that's good. That's what I'd have chosen. And
she did.
He whispered to me, you did. I got no idea. Anyway, but a very.
I had given Edith's version.
But I
just
found, knowing this ancient tongue that's been spoken on these outer margins, the known world for so very, very, very many centuries, and it sounds so many of it sounds so soft. I mean, my really car once said to me, it's like soft rain. Listening to Irish is like soft rain, but it acoustically was a quite extraordinary. My very last question: what was the critical response apart from me? And I was.
Criticism is unwell in Ireland. We don't have many. There's one young upstart. You'll see why I'm quoting him that. I have not read his review for the Irish Times. It is not his fault that his sub-editor said, oh, what was it? An interminable report from a mind-numbing war. Or, no, it's a mind-numbing report from an interminable war.
He's talking about your play or about the reviewer?
The production.
Oh.
But in the middle of it, apparently this young critic turns around and says, to give Aeschylus his credit. That's the takeaway quote from that. Look, it's not for everybody. It's never going to be for everybody. The vast majority of people who came to see it took us for what we were trying to do and really loved it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in the paper of record, he didn't. So be it. You can't please everybody. There was another review, the lady Trina who played Atos.
Not to go back to reviews, I mean, did audience members come?
Oh, audiences loved it and came back.
Yes.
And my favourite thing that happened was that Irish-speaking audiences not only came in their droves, but they would sit around, and so the cafe of the theatre, the National Theatre in Dublin, was like an Irish language hub for the 3 weeks that we were on stage. And that's worth more than any to give any critic his due.
Thank you so much.
I think we've run out of time,
Yes.
but this was a good moment at which to run out of time. Thank you so much, Conor. Thank you so much. Here outside to join us to